So yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys again for inviting us. Just to give a bit of intro, my name's Alexa.
I'm Lucas.
And we run Escape, which is a 3D design and sort of motion studio based in London. Not far from you, pretty much around the corner. And yeah, today we want to sort of talk you through sort of the past, present, and future of XK, covering our backgrounds, sort of what got us to launch the studio, and the projects that we did along the way, and the process that we sort of settled on. And yeah, to give you a bit of backstory into ourselves, I come more from like a digital art background. I've always been creative as a kid, but my creativity really exploded when I got my hands on a computer. And ever since, I've been obsessed with this idea of finding software and like using that and abusing that to create art, either static or in motion. And yeah, after finishing my studies, I've worked at a couple sort of London-based studios, originally as a 3D artist, and I evolved into sort of creative and art direction. And yeah, again, working with 3D tools, and blending this like procedural sort of design system and simulation with more sort of traditional techniques that stem from the visual art, such as sculpting and painting. So it was very important for me to always keep this balance between like the human input and the machine input, and maintaining this very like symbiotic relationship between the two, and having each one influencing sort of the other in a very mutual way. So yeah, in those years, I had a chance to work with some really lovely people and clients, sort of seeing projects from initial stage all the way to production, sort of like leading the in-house teams. And as much as I love being involved in like all aspects of a process, my focus and what I really gravitate towards is sort of the direction, the look and feel of the piece, sort of like putting importance on how we go about making the work, but more so on how that work is perceived, sort of what reaction and sensation it triggers in the viewer, and how the design, the color, the light, the texture, in the rhythm of the motion and the sound can be utilized to convey a certain sort of idea or a certain concept.
And for me, I came from sort of digital art direction, interactive design and animation background before sort of going and directing and making a lot of short films and music videos for either some friends or later some bands and stuff, before kind of going and focusing more onto the kind of high-end 3D. Really fell in love with using simulation and sort of procedural motion tools, and then I got to work at places like Push Deluxe and Man vs. Machine, where I sort of combine the kind of directorial thinking and conceptual thinking with use of the 3D simulation tools, but always kind of being interested not just in the sort of commercial side of things, but also doing a lot of kind of self-initiated smaller bits for Instagram, as I, always found that medium super fascinating, with like having a super short piece to kind of make an impact. And then we as a duo, we met and collaborated at first at Future Deluxe and later at Man vs. Machine here in London, working on lots of different projects for Nike. We did some collaborations with Apple, Logitech and some other brands, and sort of having done that for a few years and kind of realizing that we always kind of enjoyed working together, we wanted to see like how, or if we could take this sort of collaboration and move it into something that would interest us as personally, not just as commercial projects, which is what then kind of led to exploring these themes where we were both sort of fascinated with nature in this kind of alien sense and sort of interested in abstract flowers, which led to a short film which kind of started this whole journey, which is a film called Flower that we're just gonna play now.
We clap. That's amazing. So cool.
Thank you. Yeah, this is quite old now. I think it was released in 2017. Yeah, it was
That's
first. We started making a few more colorful and like light and like bright things since then. But yeah, we actually didn't set out at that time or didn't really imagine that this personal project started a whole series of flower-related work that follow us to this day. And flowers, I mean, we love working with them because they combine both of our strengths on like the visual front, the technical front, like motion-wise, they can be super sort of fun and challenging to work with, but at the same time really satisfying. And then on the textural and the design front, you can really push that tactility, intricacy, and sort of like beauty that we love and admire in nature.
So after we finished that project, we kind of got quite a few commissions because the piece was quite successful online, and we decided to follow up on them and quit our jobs and sort of see where they're going to lead us if we're just going to go and do it. And this led to sort of first commercial work that we did as a duo, which was a project for Velcro, sort of explaining the backstory of Velcro as an invention, which was a short film that, again, we're just going to play.
Wow.
Thank you. So yeah, we were approached by Velcro, sort of the branch in Australia, to tell this like origin story in like a very poetic way, and based on our experience of working with flowers, but also working on more technical films like Nike, Flyknit, and this sort of the part of the technology, and marrying the two was such a dream project for us to get to work on. And a bit of sort of like the idea behind Velcro is that the inventor of it, this guy called George Mestral, he was walking his dog in the French Alps, and he noticed that there's this burr plant which would get stuck onto his dog's fur, and
he took it home, studied it under the microscope, kind of looking at the hook, and then noticed that the hook on the plant kind of gets attached to the loop on his socks or whatever that was, or on the dog's fur. and recreated this in the lab, which is a sort of one of the first examples in history of biomimicry. And the parallel between the nature and the technology and sort of seeing them side by side is why we decided to kind of use the split screen to tell the story that way. And it again is like one of the first projects where we kind of define this idea of abstracting a narrative and kind of creating this concise visual experience, which we love to keep poetic and quite artistic while keeping the sort of tactility and realness and kind of relatability and technical intricacy that sort of then followed us through the whole practice.
And yeah, we brought this approach to more product sort of centered commercial realm. For example, we worked on a series of visuals for like a earbud brand and sort of extracting the characteristics of the product and the materiality that they're based upon. And for example, how tight like an ear wing would fit on your ear, sort of visualizing that through these like beautiful, soft sort of cloth sculpture, or the chrome case that these buds would come in and sort of merging that, submerging that in like a pool of a liquid metal, and always like building these worlds that encapsulate the products and express all of the features in a very sort of abstract way. We also got to collaborate with Sagmeister and Walsh back in the day on a sort of beauty and function project that they were doing at that time, which led into this exhibition that toured worldwide. And here we were given some typography to interpret and finding ways to spark this ASMR sort of type of sensations and feelings in the viewer. So really satisfying sort of simulations that would burst out of this type.
Yeah, I was sort of trying to find ways how to enrich the typography and surprise the viewer with something unexpected, which was super fun to experiment. And it would kind of also sometimes surprise us when we would be kind of setting these simulations up and get some unexpected results, which was a lot of fun.
We were also lucky to be brought on board on the sort of creating the new visual campaign for the London Symphony Orchestra for, I think it was 2019. The campaign was called Roots and Origins, and the whole concept was to take this motion data of the orchestra conductor, Sir Simon Rattle, and take this data and transform it into this really overwhelming and like rich digital garden that would convey or sort of represent the orchestra itself, and then track this story of a plant or of a flower in reverse, from like flowering stage all the way down to its seed, really speaking to this idea of the roots and origins of the whole campaign.
So the result was, we like to kind of refer to it as a 4-dimensional sculpture that didn't happen in the sort of just spatial 3 dimensions, but also kind of followed and stretched across the time as it was following the conductor. And it was interesting, this sort of taking it to its roots, because the next project that we worked on was this kind of roots of a cognac brand it was a commission for Remy Martin, and kind of seeing how we can apply some of the principles that we would use on a project like this, but move it into more kind of like a luxury brand story experience, and tracing the process of making cognac back to kind of literally its roots and origins and where it came from. It was sort of interesting to make this underground journey underground and transform it into this surreal kind of sculptural, luxurious artwork, but still trying to keep it relatable and recognizable as something that would kind of lead to this cognac that you want to drink on an occasion.
Very special occasion. And yeah, apart from flower projects, after doing quite a few of those, we also ventured into different sort of territories. And this was a self-initiated piece that I did back in summer 2019. It was a project called Hair. I was really attracted to the idea of using this hair element that's more sort of intimate, like a vessel for, again, artistic sort of expression, and imbue it with this undercurrent of weirdness and otherworldliness, and isolating these strands of hair and sort of seeing it more as a sculptural element or something that you can paint with or manipulate in 3D. Again, taking that hair and juxtaposing with more transparent elements such as water or glass until they begin to fuse and harmonize with each other. And this almost acted as a binding element that completed some of the pieces. And even though this was completely computer generated, I still wanted to express those really sort of tactile and like very satisfying sensations of curling your hair or combing or plaiting, and seducing the viewer with this very photoreal detail and hypnotizing sort of motion. And I was very inspired at the same time by what other hairdressers and artists were working with hair were creating in the real world, and always being inspired by that. And they were looking at hair again as and like the human head more as a canvas to create these very vivid three-dimensional artworks, and seeing that really high level of craft and the combination of like these traditional techniques of hairstyling like braiding, and how they mix that with like modern coloring techniques such as balayage or like stenciling on a buzz cut. In terms of motion and the mechanics of the hair movement, it is something that's very unique in the way that it can move like in a very elegant and mesmerizing manner. And I personally was very intrigued to test the physics of hair from more of a simulation point of view, and set up different like properties and parameters of the hair, the stiffness, plasticity, and all of that, and then witness how it responds under these forces and or how it falls under its own gravity. And you can argue that the simulation solver in that case was almost like as a collaborator on this project, and some very spontaneous experiments would spark new ideas or lead to some unexpected sort of surprising forms that I could then later sort of refine and like manually craft and then feed back into the simulation, and sort of that dance that I was sort of telling you about at the start. And yeah, this is to this day one of my sort of favorite and most fun personal projects I worked on.
It's going to lead, the colors on the right are going to lead nicely to a film that I made later, and we
On
just
purpose.
this was something that I kind of made and studied for a while after being fascinated by fine dining and sort of way how modern cuisine plates dishes. And you always hear these expressions about, if you watch MasterChef, you hear these things about food of plate referred to as piece of art, or like an abstract painting on a plate, and all these sort of things, which was kind of one aspect of this. But also, being curious about this weirdness and kind of almost visual and design quality of some of the food, which can go from these sort of more beautiful frames that you see here to something that kind of descends into this chaos and comedy almost when you look at these kind of 70s dinner parties. And that comedy aspect and the humor and also the colors were really good inspiration behind the project. But not only that, but also these kind of mechanics behind certain foods and seeing how they can be interpreted in CG with a bit more sort of abstract take on, say, stuck in and this infinite burger, or how dumplings would be fold, and sort of watching that and being inspired by the kind of real colors as well. Obviously, having a nice stringy cheese on a pizza represented there, as well as kind of then looking at something that already looks kind of cool if you look at ramen, but then really taking it into sort of very synthetic and crazy colors with this synthetic ramen one.
So yeah, after collaborating as a duo for about 2 years at that point, we wanted to sort of take things further and launched XK in February 2020, just before everything went down. Perfect timing to launch a studio. And yeah, we wanted to carry this intention of creating these imaginary sort of like hallucinated worlds, and like expand and invite more people to collaborate with us, and yeah, really sort of take this further and see where it leads.
Yeah, then sort of looking at the projects that we did before launching XK, we kind of saw that there were certain pillars that kind of the studio would be built on, starting with nature and the obsession with flowers and like anything nature really. Also tech, and not only tech in terms of the sort of products and stuff, but also the technology that we use to create it, but also always being sort of influenced by the sort of current trends in fashion culture, but looking at it from kind of this hyper real point of view that always keeps this tactility and sort of, which makes it a little bit more relatable from our point of view. And then kind of this overarching thing, which is kind of demonstrated in a lot of those projects, is this sort of abstracting of the narratives.
In terms of process, we put a lot of emphasis on R&D and exploration with every single project. We try to dedicate a big chunk of the timeline to that. And we found out that this is the way that always leads to like the most sort of unexpected and innovative type of work, and always combining like curiosity and playfulness on both conceptual level, but also on the technical front and style front. But then as well as having a very strong emphasis on how we make things and the setups we use and the technical approach. This is always combined with like strong art direction, and always trying to convey at the end, no matter how we build a piece, it's how striking the final frame is and how the thing looks in the end.
And also kind of having this play and sort of living in between two different approaches, between a sort of more directed and explorative way of working, because with CG, on that left side of that diagram, kind of showing how it's usually structured into pipelines, because 3D and CG is a very kind of specialist field where you're going to have modelers and and art directors and people who do texturing, rigging, animation, lighting, rendering, compositing, all these things. It's like a very structured and rigid pipeline, whereas we tend to work more on that kind of right-hand side, where it's a lot more sort of explorative, where we do lots of different shots and then kind of put them together, see how they fit, and sort of build our projects and films that way. But obviously, you need to have a little bit of both to successfully navigate projects. So like finding this and learning how to combine them and how to work with them is kind of a big part of how the studio operates.
Yeah, there's still some structure there, or at least sort of big parameters that will keep the project on track and not have complete anarchy. But yeah, we also have a very open attitude towards the role of each person in the studio. And our team is always invited to run with something that they might find excited, or sort of parts from a commercial projects, or like R&D experiments, which might not have made it in the final film. We could then sort of extract those and take them further into full sort of studio projects, which is what sort of happened with a lot of our sort of past work.
And the projects that we will sort of now present as part of the studio that we completed, we kind of bunched them into a few different categories that we can run through. It was always this like bits which were either about abstract nature, or we did a lot of skincare stuff, or product films, and then in the end we're going to touch on some self-initiated work as well. And to start with the abstract nature was the theme that was kind of most common through before we launched the studio. We have this, we started with this commission called Strange Spring by the Galleries in Sydney, which was this project about alien flora defrosting from a winter hibernation, kind of combining the themes of nature and the nature that exists between a real and imagined world, but still sort of tactile, even though it's fictitious, and building this world and arrangement of these real flowers, which each has this kind of little story moment in the film.
So for our mood board and inspiration for this, we actually used AI back in 2019. Where there was a tool called Gan Breather. We played a little bit with that, and this allowed you to mix sort of different genes, aka different images of very, very different objects, to arrive at something like completely new, very dreamlike. And we hunted for these like more surreal shapes that still somewhat resembles flowers. And then we got inspired by that, and then tried to remodel and sort of recreate them in 3D. And apart from the film that you just saw, we also worked on a few of these like standalone arrangements that were created in extremely high resolution that were then used in the gallery's sort of commercial space in Sydney.
It was also cool to see, we then got to display it in New York as part of their initiative that was sort of showing some motion artwork in a screen near Times Square. So that was cool to view that recording, and also then seeing the commercial evolution of this project, because then based on that arrangement that you saw earlier, we got a commission from Liberty and Timberland collab that we're going to show next.
And yeah, they so Timberland and Liberty collaborate on a series of these boots, where they took the Liberty, very notorious Liberty fabric, this like floral pattern fabric, and we then sort of took that 2D fabric and created 3D flowers sort of inspired from it. And here is the little film that we made.
Yeah, it was sort of getting inspired by those more realistic flowers and interpreting the Liberty pattern in a little bit closer way, and yeah, bringing them to life in this short film. And then like I would say one of our most proud floral commissions and projects was one that we did last year.
Yeah, we were commissioned by Apple to create this digital bloom artwork that was to be used for the launch of their new MacBook Pros. And this artwork would then be used across the website, like stores and other digital retail. And this is meant to speak to the power of the device, but also the power in the hands, the part of the device in the hand of an artist. And we took cues from the materiality of the product again, but transforming that into something a bit more organic and natural and very tactile, that conveys that sort of emotion that we always strive for, and playing with like glass and refractive textures and iridescence to highlight this the feature of the liquid retina display. That was like a pretty important sort of feature of the product. And taking these man-made elements like wire or fiber optic and metallics, and then applying this blooming motion to them and layering it with other sort of layers and translucency all into one visual, sort of layering these elements that resembles materials that you might find inside of the computer as well. And we, even though this was for like a very tech company, we wanted to take that further and create something that's more expressive and almost has a painterly quality.
Yeah, it was super fun collab with Apple. They were very nice client to work with. They gave us so much freedom to sort of create this thing. And once we had it, it was cool to kind of have this circle moment where we got the actual laptop and run the scenes on it, and sort of having this whole thing kind of come together was really cool. And kind of last notable floral project was this collaboration that we did with Tobias Feist, a German photographer that did this massive exhibition of hands, and us creating sort of this synthetic environment piece for it that ended up being was meant to be a real exhibition, but because of COVID was this kind of ended up in actually arguably a little bit cooler virtual exhibition that you can go through. That was, yeah, a lot of fun to sort of create this neon green housing for the hand glove structure.
And yeah, another area that we work with quite a bit is this skincare. And this area allows us to really combine our love for arts and the science and technology, because we are often tasked to interpret some very scientific and like factual claims in a very abstract way that differentiated from the more medical sort of look and feel that you see with these skincare campaigns.
And one of our first projects for this, or the very first project, was a collaboration with Zitstika. This is a R&D reel that you're watching. It's a brand that deals with acne, and we got to sort of explore ways of expressing the topics around acne and various skin concerns and conditions in a way that would be visually pleasing, but kind of not shine away from the topic or being sort of too off-putting, because you know, they actually had some issues with showing some of these things on Facebook, as it was getting banned. So it was kind of an interesting way to like find it in a way that it's still relatable and communicates the topic, but doesn't get banned on Facebook ads.
Further on, we got to collaborate with a London-based agency called Havas on several of their Durex campaigns, and this one was for their brand refresh that they did a couple of years ago. And the section that we worked on was expressing these like different product features in a textural form, and interpreting flavors and sensations in an abstract and then tactile way. And it was cool because this project was sort of taken up into the real world quite a bit, and sort of plastered around London and the rest of the world, which was super cool to see.
We then collaborated with a Chinese actually skincare brand called Netil. It was quite cool because they let us explore. Usually the skincare brands are very rigid, and they always want everything to be quite accurate and kind of relatable and safe. And here Uniskin let us explore this in a super abstract, almost surreal way. Like even us had issues recognizing skin or any of these ingredients, but they let us kind of run away with it. This really
on the
cool.
left is meant to represent a retinol, a retinol formula. So they were really happy with what we did in the previous project. We came back to sort of work on this. This was sort of done in collaboration with a Chinese space sort of culture program, where we took the concept of space-time fabric and black holes and use them as metaphors for sort of the human skin and sort of skin properties and benefits of the product onto your skin, which was again quite fun conceptually to play with.
And then a big project that we did was a collaboration with Equique Paris that sort of spoke about partnership between a big French skincare brand called Biotherm and a French biotech company called Carbios. And they piloted the first beauty product in the world that was kind of packaged in a bottle made from 100% bio-recycled plastic, which kind of similar to Velcro. We wanted to tell the story of these two companies, kind of two parallel films, describing the similarities between the two companies in the process of things in kind of quite editorial and stylized way.
And from the Biotherm side, they were using this thing called live plankton. So we try to find ways to visualize that at various different scales in a very editorial way, and as well as abstracting the process of breaking down the plastic down to its like smallest sort of monomers and polymers. And we also designed these like Pyrenees mountain lakes where the plankton is actually sourced from. And also really sort of fascinated by how plankton looks from space. And because plankton is unable to propel itself against the current, they almost act as visualizers for the ocean currents themselves. So we ended up visualizing that behavior in the film and creating these compositions where flurries of different colored particles and trails come in and out of focus.
And also finding ways, kind of interesting ways of visualizing the molecules in some kind of more premium and sculptural way than the kind of usual hexagon kind of shapes. Yeah,
and we worked with Biotherm afterwards as well on some further projects. This was a key visual, a bit more premium focused, visualizing this plankton in like a very microscopic way that was used again in some of their campaigns.
I actually got to see it in Stockholm, in an airport, which is quite cool. But this kind of leads to some of the product films that we did, where we using again the kind of same bits about abstracting these feelings and features of the products. One of the first projects we did was another collaboration with Timberland and their True Cloud technology. They use knitted wool in footwear, and we worked on this campaign that kind of merged all these sensations of wool and cloud together. Like the cloud is wool, the cloud is light, it's incredibly comfortable, and kind of have to get in these sensations across, which was cool to see, not just in a film, but then also in the whole campaign with some photography and interactive website that was done. And it was cool to see, spend some time on the R&D and researching these different ways how to make clouds and how to kind of have them interact with the shoe and threads and kind of figuring it all out together.
This is another sort of series of films that we did for Master Dynamics, it's an American earbud, earphone company. And yeah, we created some short films and key visuals, and again, building these very graphic and abstract worlds out of the colorways, out of those materials, and creating these like copper-like pillows, and always wanting to evoke some sort of sensation or tactility that you can feel within those textures.
Having, you know, something similar for their sport edition as well, where it was all about kind of big focus on the product itself, but then also, you know, looking at bits of abstracting bits like the materiality of, say, a Kevlar case or pearlescent quality on some of the coating, while also kind of mentioning the wireless charging. But like the big part, you know, like the focus on the product and details of all the textures and all those bits is something that was then massively kind of important for our for the next two projects that we're going to show that were commissions by
So yeah, we were brought on board this project by Hublot, their internal sort of design studio, who collaborated with very well-known Japanese artist, as you know, probably his name is Murakami, and we wanted they wanted us to create a launch film that blends this Swiss craftsmanship with the more psychedelic and sort of rainbow hues that Murakami is known for. So our concept was to deconstruct the watch into its core components and raw materials and hero them through abstraction. So then these sort of elements would then be used to create, in a culminating point, this kinetic sort of moving flower sculpture.
Yeah, and it was cool to do a lot of R&D that we spoke about before, even though like here it was taken in places a little bit too far for, you know, from a point of view of Swiss luxury kind of precision brand, but, you know, it was important to push things as far as possible and to sort of find where the limit for your client is before kind of taking it back and kind of settling on the look, which we ended up going with.
Yeah, we took those sort of simulated mechanisms and we tried to bring in that sleekness through the lighting, through sort of the textures themselves. And in the end, we settled on keeping the mechanism quite sharp and undistorted, and instead bring that psychedelic nature through the use of polychromatic metallics and lighting, and sort of give life to those chrome parts.
Yeah, it was a similar kind of having like the nod to some of the psychedelic bits through this dispersion inside of the detail of the sapphire that kind of started from being super rough to being, you know, very kind of neat and polished in the end.
For the rubber sort of section of the film, we wanted to portray this art of fusion, which is something that Hublot are very known for, aka it's a combination of modern materials such as rubber with something more traditional like metal, and then show the synergy between these two forms, and also taking the grooves from the rubber band and really exaggerate them. So these refractions are really sort of popping out.
Yeah, and for that like last moment again, it was a lot of exploration of how can we bring these petals to life through motion, and finding ways and experimenting with lots of kind of different tests and motion bits. And it wasn't just all about this kind of experimentation. It was obviously a lot to do with how we actually portray the product itself, because for something so super luxurious as this happen is like an 80,000 euro watch, you need it to look very, very premium and very real, and kind of really celebrate all the craftsmanship that goes into creating that. So for us, kind of remodeling and recreating a lot of the model itself and a lot of the product itself was super important to like get all the textures right, because it kind of needed to look better than almost it would look like in reality if you would take it with the camera, as like with no imperfections or no nothing at all, and like having all these bits spot on, which is something that I think like we kind of practice on this project, but then sort of fully then explored in one that we just finished now, that was launched last week, which was another project for Hublot, which is going to play.
So yeah, with this project, we started with, again, a lot of R&D. We looked into these digital glitches and how would they look like in a 3D dimension, and keep this cyber futuristic feel in a premium way, and doing R&D to find, again, these boundaries between sleekness and something a bit more out there for the Hublot as a brand. And we produced a series of these like very high resolution stills with extreme scrutiny on all the finishes, and again had to find ways to remodel most of the watch and generate all the surface textures and make sure that everything looks spot on from all the angles, as this is being examined by the watchmakers themselves, who can spot any sort of imperfection
or wrong texture. So then the last bit, which for us is like one of the most important bits for the studio, are the self-initiated projects. And we kind of in the summer launched this or initiated this XKR series of projects that we just sort of start ourselves. And the first two issues of it were examining the sort of aesthetic of footwear and the culture around it in a digital realm, looking at it from kind of two different angles. The first film was all about this digital tailoring, and the second one kind of combined the construction aesthetic with protective gear and kind of merging them all into this moving sneaker form. We're going to play the first film now.
So yeah, this this film looked at deconstructing the sneaker form and also having a more playful take at this typical sort of CG shoe advert that we've seen and we've done a lot of in the past. And also taking inspiration from like modern ways of tailoring in 3D software and playing with elements and materials that make up the shoe. For example, sort of the thread, the cloth, all these patterns and colors are deconstructed and then reassembled into these kinetic sort of sculptures where at the same time, the shoe is like stretched, twisted, and bent, and it reacts to its environment and the objects that surround it, and is always in this like dance with them. And this was the result and focus of one of our lead sort of 3D artists called Raquel, and she did this over. She spent a lot of time on the aesthetic of the fabrics and how the thread and like stitching and how can we really push that and really create that complexity of thread and layering and how we can then interact everything sort of like combined and how that works in a full form sort of film piece.
And then there's the next one and the last film that we're going to play. So this was a sort of a result of different experimentation streams in the studio. Kim, one of our sort of lead artists as well, experimented a lot with this fluid where like I made and played around with these kind of protective shoe designs. And it was about then going and looking at all these experiments and sort of finding this direction and a way how to recontextualize them into one cohesive piece. But also having kind of fun collaborating with a graphic designer, which is something also that was kind of common with the previous film, and kind of pushed us not only kind of conceptually, technically, but kind of overall into creating these kind of this new visual language for us, which was combining our work with kind of more 2D work into these collages and into this like one coherent world that kind of like really helped us to kind of build this identity for each shoe, but also each of the films individually, and kind of bring it and merge them all together as kind of like one coherent project at the same time.
Yeah, and the launch of the XKR luckily synchronized with the London Design Festival that we were part of, and you guys also were part of, and it was so satisfying and so much fun to open our doors to all the like new faces, and made us realize these events like this that bring the design and the creative community together is what makes the whole effort and like the whole sort of time and effort that we spend on these projects really worthwhile, and seeing the live reactions from the people and taking our work from the small screen and from just your phone and Instagram into a bigger space. So we definitely want to organize events like this more in the future, and really sort of have a really great time with our mates and new people. And yeah, I think we're
Bang on time.
pretty much right.
You have 1 minute to ask questions.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening. Hope you find some of it interesting.
Thank you for that. That was amazing. Your wizards. We've always wondered what happened in the studio next door, but now we know.
Now you know.
Now you have to do the reverse. You have to talk and
That was insane. But yeah, thank you for that. That was really incredible.
Yeah, pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think what was really fascinating was seeing how a studio that's so digitally focused, as in the practice and the tools, but actually the work itself is very organic and feels very natural. And I think that was just really interesting to see, because I think from a lot of 3D, sometimes it can feel, I don't know, it doesn't have that intertwining as much. I think there was a real kind of natural element that was really beautiful and actually quite exciting to see. So that was really, yeah, that was really nice.
oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think for us, it's the 3D kind of is more, of course, we're obsessed with it and it's great, but it's kind of a tool they use to sort of examine some other topics. And, you know, especially for us, this fascination with nature, you know, always leads to this, you know, using it to kind of explore things that don't look as synthetic, or they look super synthetic, but then they have playfulness to them. So it's kind of a, you know, playing with those tools to kind of escape this 3D-ness almost a lot of the time.
Yeah, we are using this software called Houdini, and the software itself is not really intended for the kind of work that we do. People use it for these like high-end visual effects for like blockbuster movies, but we have this very sort of design and sort of like heavily art directed sort of intention and how we use it, and turn the tools that it provides like really upside down, and try to abuse that and push it to find something new and keep ourselves really excited and wanting to come to work every day. So,
especially in this building.
I mean, unless anyone's got any immediate questions, we did have a couple of questions that we already had that we wanted to ask. So I don't know if anyone's got any immediate. No?
Just to
Okay.
say that it was really, really fascinating learning about your thought process and kind of the difference between the kind of more organic, like testing side of things versus having like a strict plan. And also just what like inspires both of you, like the hair was so cool to see. And in that picture of both of you, where you've got neon pink tips on your hair, is that real or is that?
that is real. Yeah. It's a pretty old picture. Yeah, actually, after doing the hair and playing with hair in CG, I was like, why not play with my own hair and experiment with these crazy colors? But yeah, that's a pretty old picture from 2019. Yeah,
Oh, it was real.
It was real.
Yeah, maybe it's also a couple of quick questions, but I mean, maybe the first one is like, kind of what aspects of your practice do you find the most challenging? I think would be kind of an interesting to find out.
I think the fact, like when we had the directed and R&D approach, I think like because we try to stick to that as much as possible, sometimes it can be kind of very close because the timelines for these films are short, and you might spend weeks in the R&D period, and then you might not, like you would be, you know, we might be super excited about that stuff, the stuff that comes out of it ourselves, but maybe the client goes like, what the, you know, what is this stuff? Like, and you go, okay, all right, we need to actually make something very, very quickly and only use a portion of this. But then it kind of like always comes together. And so you kind of always live on this edge of total failure.
Really work. No, but I think most of the time it works because we're not going blindly into R&D. We still have a pretty strong sort of direction and idea, like in sort of top line thinking what we are trying to achieve, and we definitely try to communicate that with the clients, with our team, and making sure we are somewhat on the same track, but leaving enough gaps there and enough freedom to experiment that R&D. But the R&D is still controlled into yeah, it's not complete anarchy. But yeah, I think the challenge is, it's pretty much finding or collaborating with clients that really get our way of working, because we have clients coming from all over the place, and they are some are used to this way, some expect us to be more of like storyboard sort of driven, which we don't. So kind of having a feeling for the type of client which will fit us and really getting that straight away at the start of a project and not realizing it halfway through. I think it's something that we learn more and more as we go.
That's great. And yeah, maybe another one is, I guess, what inspires you with the work you do, or like how you approach it, or just generally, I guess, what inspires you?
I think there's this thing where we have to be inspired by both kind of things that come from outside of what we do. So, you know, the usual stuff is like the meme culture, the reels on Instagram, the kind of stuff that's all the way out there. But we also need to kind of keep ourselves inspired and kind of on our toes technically. So the tools that we use, we need to kind of always try to expand that and find ways to keep ourselves kind of like learning new things and experimenting new things, because in what we do, the technical side is kind of as important as the conceptual side in a way, because the merge of the technical prowess and the concept is what sort of gets us where we are. So like having both is super important.
Yes, and this inspiration doesn't really happen at like the start of a project. We sometimes just dive in there, or like always try to keep playing and exploring and being inspired by some playful sort of like happy accidents. And I think there is definitely a level of sort of surprise and inspiration that comes from us being in the software and just pushing things and sort of encountering different things which spark ideas, and then we take that further, and then we also take cues from nature and sort of the more like
Instagram reels.
Yeah, Instagram reels. And yeah, deep water creatures, and that's sort of so it's on two fronts.
Nice. Amazing. Cool. Well, yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any final.
How much time do you spend caching stuff?
Well, we luckily we have this internal heating, which comes handy in this winter period, but even now it's getting super hot. So we have a lot of computers there that we spend a lot of time caching, I would say, and more time rendering, but a lot of time caching as well. And a lot of time uploading
and backing all that
backup,
cache.
all those terabytes of simulations online. It's a lot.
Yeah, no, I think it must be boiling in there.
It's
It is,
boiling.
yeah. Anytime you're called,
Anytime you're called,
spend out.
That's why there's two offices now.
We have two machines in here as well, and it can get steamy in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to talk us through that. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Inviting. Yeah, it was super fun to chat to you about what we do.
Yeah, I think
do the same.